Good day, everyone. Today, we will discuss the Lesson 3 Assessment in Teaching Listening together with Miss Fiona Buday and Shane Barlizo.
Objectives. So our first objectives is understand the importance of assessment in teaching listening skills. Second, identify the different types and purposes of listening tasks and tests. Lastly, apply assessment principles in teaching listening skills. So to start, teacher's responsibility. So as a teacher, it is your responsibility to understand the language levels, strengths, and weaknesses of your students. This involves assessing their proficiency in various language skills, including listening. However, assessing listening skills can be challenging because it is difficult to directly observe the internal cognitive process involved in listening. Next, we have the assessment in listening. So to assess students' listening abilities, you can focus on checking their attention comprehension and acquisition of the content. So this can be done through various assessment techniques such as quiz, listening exercises, and comprehension questions. So it is important to assess listening skills at different stages, including before, during, and after listening activities. This allows you to evaluate students' ability to anticipate, understand, and reflect on the content presented to them. So, in addition to that, by assessing students' listening skills, it is also important for you as a teacher to evaluate your own classroom practices. So this involves reflecting on teaching methods, students' listening comprehension, and language development. So by regularly evaluating and adjusting their classroom practices, you can create a conducive learning environment that supports students' language learning and overall growth. So, assessment tasks in listening can be divided into different stages to effectively evaluate students' strengths and weaknesses, monitor their progress, and evaluate their success in listening comprehension. Assessment task. So, during the pre-listening stage, the purpose of assessment is to determine the students' existing strengths and weaknesses in listening. So this can be done through diagnostic assessments or pre-assessments activities that help identify areas where students may need additional support or instruction. So formative assessment is conducted during the listening tasks themselves. So this type of assessment is ongoing and allows to monitor the students' progress, provide feedback, and make instructional decisions in real time. It also helps identify areas where students may be struggling, and maybe you can adjust your teaching strategies accordingly. So summative assessment takes place after the listening tasks are completed. It is used to evaluate students' overall success in listening comprehension. So this can be done through quizzes, tests, or other assessment methods that measure students' understanding and retention of the content. So purpose of assessment. The purpose of assessment in listening is to reinforce learning and track students' progress. It provides valuable information that can inform your teaching decisions, such as identifying areas of improvement, adjusting tasks and instructional strategies based on performance feedback, and providing target support to students who may need it. So, By using assessment as a tool, you can ensure that you're teaching informed and responsive to students' needs, ultimately enhancing their learning experience and facilitating their overall progress in listening comprehension. So what do we assess? So when giving listening tests to your students, it is important to consider the specific skills you want to assess. So you can ask these questions. So first is, am I assessing students' ability to comprehend the overall meaning of the listening material? Second, am I assessing students' ability to decode and understand the individual language components within the listening material? Third, am I assessing students' ability to focus on and recall important details after listening? So, by considering these questions, you can ensure that your listening assessments target the specific skills you want to evaluate in your students. So, this will also provide a more accurate assessment of their listening abilities and help guide your instruction accordingly. So what is the purpose of the listening task, and what particular aspect of listening skills are you going to access? So the purpose of listening task is to assess students in listening skills and their ability to comprehend and understand spoken language. So when designing listening assessments, it is important to consider the specific competencies outlined in the K-12 curriculum guide for English listening comprehension, or the LC section. So this will help determine which particular LC competency the students will be tested on. So it also important to delve into different types and purposes of listening tasks according to Brown 2004. So identify the various types of listening, and teachers can align the purpose of the task with a specific listening test to be given to students. So it is crucial to select appropriate listening text and choose the type of listening task that matches intended assessment goals. So by considering the competencies and types of listening tasks, teachers can effectively assess students' listening skills and provide target instruction to support their development in this area.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will be talking about types or purpose of listening. So let's begin. So the first one will be intensive listening. So intensive listening, focusing on the form of the language, what to assess. Listening task and test may focus on listening for the perception of the components of language, such as sounds, words, discourse markers, and etc. When we say intensive listening, it is focused and concentrated form of listening where the listeners pays close attention to the speakers or audio source to fully understand the message being conveyed. This type of listening requires active engagement and concentration to grasp the details and emotion behind the spoken words. Intensive listening is often used in situations where accuracy and comprehension are crucial, such as during lectures, important conversation, or when learning a new language. So, intensive listening is important to us because we can learn something from it. Like, it can enhance our understanding and to become effective communicators to others. So there are some examples for that. First is the teacher will conduct a lecture because students engage in intensive listening during lecture time of the teacher. They can focus on understanding complex concepts, taking detailed notes, and asking questions to clarify any points they find challenging. The next would be the counseling therapist. Engage in intensive listening to emphatically understand their client's emotions, concerns, and experience, facilitating effective communication and supporting the therapeutic process. Those are some examples of intensive listening. Embracing intensive listening as a fundamental aspect of communication can lead to improved connections, enriched learning experience, and greater personal and professional growth. Now, let us proceed to the next topic, which is also part of the type or purpose of listening, the responsive listening, or showing understanding. So, what to assess? Listening task or test may focus on the student's ability to create an appropriate short message after listening to short conversations or utterances. Responsive listening also means listening carefully to what someone is saying and then responding in a way that shows you understand and you are paying attention. For example, the students will share his or her opinion in the class after listening to a discussion or presentations. Individuals are asked to express their opinions, thoughts, or reactions to the content they have heard. Responsive listening is the key to effective communication. By listening attentively, showing understanding, and responding thoughtfully, we can build stronger relationships, enhance comprehension, and foster meaningful connection with others. Practicing responsive listening leads to better communication and deeper understanding and conversation and interactions. And now let us proceed to the next topic. The next topic would be the selective listening. So selective listening is picking out important information such as dates, times, and locations. So what to assess? Listening tasks or tasks involve listening to scan for specific information. Students may be directed to listen for directions, names, numbers and figures, facts, events, or grammatical categories. This type of listening is essential in various contexts, including educational settings and everyday interactions, as it helps individuals comprehend and respond effectively to the specific details. So, in educational assessment, listening listening task or test often requires two students to engage in selective listening to scan for specific information. So the best example for that is having a phone conversation because it engages in selective listening by concentrating on the steps provided to resolve the issue, filtering out background noise or irrelevant details. Selective listening and enhancing communication and problem solving in real life scenarios. By practicing the selective listening, individuals can improve their ability to extract key details, prioritize information, and engage actively in listening tasks, ultimately leading to more efficient and meaningful interactions. So, our last topic would be the extensive listening, understanding longer texts and connecting the ideas. Listening to a task or test may focus on developing the top down process or global understanding of spoken language. Extensive performance range from listening to lengthy lectures to purpose. Listening for the gist for the main idea and making inference are all part of extensive listening. In extensive listening, the goal is to understand and have a broad understanding of what you hear. While listening, you simply acquire or learn, but not necessarily to understand each word, but to promote comprehension. Unlike intensive, extensive does not focus on individual parts, like translating each word and focusing on grammar, but on audio as a whole. The beginner student should use easy materials to listen so they can easily understand. So how does extensive listening help? It improves comprehension, vocabulary, fluency, and language proficiency. But aside from that, it trains your hearing and improves your listening abilities. To practice extensive listening, you need to find and listen to a variety of materials. Some places to find the materials are in podcast, radio, TV shows, news, and YouTube. If you already found a material, listen carefully, and it would be much better if you used headphones. To be able to hear the audio clearly while listening, seek out the main ideas but not the details of the materials. Try to understand the important points. That's why it is important to find somewhat basic materials so it will not be frustrating and to avoid stress when dealing it. By incorporating these extensive listening activities into their language learning routine, learners can improve their listening comprehension skills and become more confident in understanding spoken language.
Regardless of macro skill, certain principles serve as guidelines when assessing reliability. A reliable test is consistent and dependable. When assessing any skills, there are some important principles that we need to keep in mind. One of these principles is reliability. A reliable test means that it is consistent and dependable. So this means that if the same test is given to the same group of people on different occasions, it should produce similar results. In other words, when we assess something, we want to make sure that the test is reliable and gives us accurate and consistent information about the skills we are testing. Bashman and Palmer 1996 describes it as getting the same results when the same test were to be administered to the same group of individuals on two different occasions in two different settings. Considerations may include such as choosing listening tasks and tests that are practical and anchored on real-life situations, considering a range of short tasks rather than a very long text and task, and making sure that the test assess the actual skills of the students. According to Bashman and Palmer in 1996, reliability means that if we give the same test to the same group of people on two different occasions, we should get similar results. To ensure reliability, there are a few things to consider. First, we should choose listening to tasks and tests that are practical and based on real-life situations. This means using tasks that are relevant to everyday life and make sense to the students. Second, it's better to have a variety of short tasks instead of a very long ones. This keeps the test manageable and helps maintain consistency. And lastly, we need to make sure that accurately evaluate the students' listening abilities. By considering these factors, we can create reliable tests that gives us consistent and useful information about the student's skills. Brown 2006 states that validity reveals the extent to which the test measures what it is supposed to measure and nothing else. He added that it is by far the most complex criterion of a good test. You need to make sure that the assessment tasks reflect or measure the competencies or objectives as stipulated in the curriculum guide. Remember that in this case, you are testing students' listening skills and not writing or speaking skills. According to Brown 2006, validity means that a test measures exactly what it's intended to measure and nothing else. So, it is the most complicated factor when evaluating a good test. To ensure validity, it's important to make sure that the assessment task match the competencies or objectives outlined in the curriculum guide. So in this case, when testing students' listening skills, we need to focus specifically on their ability to listen, not their speaking or writing skills. So designing the test to accurately measure the intended skill, we ensure that the test is valid and provides reliable insights into the students' listening abilities. This means that the test should consider constraints like limitation, time constraints, ease of administration, scoring, and etc. Although it is good to give students as many listening tasks as possible, in reality, there are other competencies from other macro skills or macro subjects that they still have to accomplish. When creating tests, we need to consider constraints such as limitation, time constraints, ease of administration, scoring, and other practical considerations. While it is beneficial to give students many listening tasks, the reality is that they have other skills and subjects to focus on too. For example, let's say we want to assess students' listening skills in an English class. It would be ideal to provide them with numerous listening tasks to practice and improve their skills. However, we need to consider the constraints we have. If we have limited time available for testing or limited resources, it may not be feasible to give an extensive number of tasks. Instead, we need to balance the number of tasks with the available time and resources. Time is often limited. Resources may not be available and students' concentration is finite. This means that teachers should also consider the quality of the listening task over quantity. Authenticity describes the relationship between the test and the real world. In the context of teaching listening skills, there are certain realities to consider. Time is often limited in a classroom setting. Resources may not always be readily available and students have a finite capacity to concentrate and focus. Given these constraints, teachers should prioritize the quality of listening tasks over the quantity. For instance, let's say a teacher wants to assess their students' listening skills. Instead of assigning many tasks that could overwhelm students and consume a significant amount of time, the teacher can select a few well-designed listening tasks that are engaging and effective. These tasks should be carefully crafted to reflect real-world situations, making them authentic. For example, the teacher might choose a listening task where students listen to a conversation between two people discussing a practical topic, such as ordering food at a restaurant or making travel arrangements. This task would provide students with an authentic experience that simulates a real-life situation they might encounter. Assessment tasks should be reflective of real-life situations which would trigger mental process similar to that of what students hear and use in their daily life. When designing or making an assessment task, it is important to make sure that they resemble real-life situations that students encounter in their daily lives. The task should prompt similar mental processes as those individual in listening and using language in everyday situations. So, creating assessment tasks that mirror real-life situations, students can practice and demonstrate their ability to listen and comprehend spoken language in contexts that are relevant and familiar to them. So this will help them to make their learning experiences more meaningful, applicable to their daily lives. Moreover, Galaxy 2021 further explained that tasks that have interactional authenticity may not necessarily replicate a real world context, but they elicit a cognitively authentic linguistic experience since they create a context in which realistic uses of language can occur. According to Galaxy 2021, tasks that have interactional authenticity may not exactly replicate real-world context, but they create an environment where realistic language use can occur. This task aims to elicit a linguistically authentic experience that reflects how language is used in practical situations. For example, let's consider a listening task where students listen to a dialogue between two friends discussing their weekend plans. The conversation may not be an exact replica of a real-life situations that students may encounter, but it provides an opportunity for students to engage in a conversation that reflects a natural language use. They can listen to the dialogue, follow the instruction between the friends, and understand how language is used in a conversational context. Language teachers, particularly in teaching listening, should consider the level and assessment methods appropriate for the students. Feedbacking is also an important aspect of assessment for students to know how to improve. Grant Wiggins, 1998, suggested that they need to understand three things about their performance. When teaching listening, language teachers need to consider the student's level of proficiency and select appropriate assessment methods. Providing feedback to students is also an important aspect of the assessment process. So Grant Wiggins suggested that students should understand three things about their performance to know how to improve. For example, let's imagine a language teacher is assessing their students' listening skills. After completing a listening task, the teacher can provide feedback to the students. Students should be informed of their progress regularly. At the same time, teachers should continuously revisit teaching strategies to meet students' listening skills. It's important for students to receive regular updates on their progress in listening skills, while teachers should constantly review and adapt their teaching strategies to meet the specific needs of the students. For example, let's consider a language class where listening skills are being taught. The teacher regularly assesses the students' listening abilities through various tasks and assessments. Based on the results, the teacher provides feedback to each student, highlighting their strengths and identifying areas for improvement. At the same time, the teacher also reflects on their teaching strategies. They consider whether the current methods and materials are effectively addressing the students' listening skills needs. If they notice that certain students are struggling with specific aspect of listening, such as understanding spoken instructions or following fast-paced conversations, the teacher might adjust their teaching approach. They could introduce new listening activities, provide additional practice exercises, or offer targeted support to help those students improve.